On the morning of April 25, 1945, a group of Russian soldiers, making their way through the rubble of the city of Berlin, made one of the most surprising discoveries of World War II. Among the ruins of what had once been a 3-story building, in one of the rooms on the ground floor, they found the bodies of 6 men lying on the ground forming a small circle. In the center of the circle, face down, another lifeless body held green gloves tightly in its hands. At first glance, the corpses did not seem to hide any kind of apparent mystery. There were thousands scattered everywhere, but upon examining them more closely, even though they were wearing German uniforms, they were surprised to discover that their features were Oriental, specifically Tibetan. What were they doing thousands of kilometers from their homeland and in the middle of a war in which officially their country was not taking part? Ignace Timothy Trebitsch was born in April 1879 in Pax, a small town located 75 kilometers from Budapest, into a wealthy family. After passing secondary and religious studies with more pain than glory, he dedicates himself to theater, but neglects his classes and spends his time loitering in the capital's cafes. At the age of 18, he traveled to Hamburg and lived for a time in an Israelite community, but overnight, he changed his religion and was baptized in an Irish Presbyterian community. Later, thanks to a scholarship he obtained through the chief of the Presbyterian mission, Trebitsch traveled to Canada and entered McGill University in Montreal. After residing for 4 years in Canada, in 1904, he traveled to London. He obtains an audience with the Archbishop of Canterbury, who appoints him vicar of the town of Appledore. After adopting English nationality, he added Lincoln to his surname. That's what he calls himself, Ignace Timothy Lincoln, or simply I.t.t. Lincoln. In London, he contacts an enigmatic character, Harold Beckett, who is suspected of being one of those superhuman beings who supervises world politics. Through the advice and influence of his discreet protector, he very quickly reached the highest degrees of initiatory societies as closed as the Ordo Templi Orientis. In June 1930, he was initiated in Tibet and became the Venerable Chao Kung after having passed the last fiery test. A monk lit 12 resin candles on his head, which burned until the end, causing 12 sores on his meat, without eliciting a complaint. His prestige was considerable. Finally, as expected in a character with these characteristics, there are different hypotheses about his disappearance. One of the versions points, although it is far from having been proven, to his death in the French hospital in Shanghai. On the other hand, more or less reliable witnesses claim to have seen him in the 1950s in the Middle East, where other dramatic events for the future of humanity were being prepared. But there is a third version of events. Although he was officially declared missing in 1943, and if we are to speculate, it is possible that the lifeless body that appeared among the ruins of Berlin in 1945, the one who jealously kept green gloves in his hands, belonged to Ignace Timothy Trebitsch Lincoln, one of the most disturbing characters in our history. It is the opposite of the Order of Tibet, the obverse of the medal. One thing are the adepts of the white fraternity of the Sacred Order of Tibet, and another thing are the adepts of the dark fraternity of the clan of Dag Dugpa. The meaning of the word Dugpa literally translates sorcerer and has a negative connotation. By sorcerer, we understand a person who performs magical practices to control the course of events and the will of people. Therefore, a black sorcerer or dark witch would be the person who uses magical practices to the detriment of others. Any rite that violates the law of free will is also considered black magic. The Dugpas are recognized by Blavatsky and more occult sources as the Shadow Brothers. The occultist points out that their rites are horrible and constitute a corrupt and degenerate non-Buddhist religion. Some texts, such as essays on the fundamental principles of occult practice, tell us that the Dugpas dedicate their energies to dark practices. The swastika is a symbol that means generative movement and is associated with higher-order transcendent sexual electricity. From left to right, clockwise, its rotation is positive, but from right to left, it is negative. For this reason, Hitler established it as a symbol of his party. He knew the modus operandi of alchemical work. At first, he was convinced that his job would be to rescue the man, bring him to the level of the Superman, and the White Lodge helped him. Hitler was a disciple of Gurdjieff, but he gave a great welcome to the man with the green gloves. He considered him the man who brought the keys to the kingdom of i.t.t, where the wise gods live. And he was wrong. History tells of his decline.